my name is Stephanie, and this is the Mental Health Millennial. And today we're going to be talking about some stuff about active listening, how-tos, when is it useful, why is it useful. So yeah, that's what we're all about today. Let's get started. Got it. So active listening is a way of listening and responding to another person that improves mutual understanding. Active listening is really, really useful skill, basically in any situation that I've pretty much encountered in my life. I've used active listening skills a lot in my personal relationships. Definitely avoided some arguments using active listening skills. As somebody who is pursuing licensure for therapy, I use it a lot in my professional life, but also in my professional life when I haven't been acting as a therapist, it can be really, really helpful to have sort of a nodding acquaintance understanding with active listening skills, even for things like job interviews, any kind of mediating conflict in the workplace. I mean, even as a server, when I was doing restaurant work, I use it in sales. And because when people tell you more about themselves, studies show that they actually trust you more. So it's building that rapport, and it's never really not going to be a useful skill to use. I'll kind of be focused more on using it in a mental health sense, obviously, going through this video, but definitely feel free to take and apply to other situations. So yeah, going on into how to actually be a great active listener. So the thing I always like to start with is your nonverbals, because it's the easiest thing to mess up, because it's just sometimes it's habit. A lot of it's habit. So nonverbal. So I use the acronym SOLAR. SOLAR stands for square, open, lean or leaning, eye contact, and relax. So just to give you an idea about what I mean by all these things. So when I'm saying square, I mean basically if these are their shoulders, here are your shoulders, you're square face to face. This is most of the time a good idea. However, if you're dealing with somebody who's having a really hard time talking or feeling uncomfortable or feeling like they're under a lot of pressure, then you can open that up to a 45, and that might get you a little bit more results. Even shoulder to shoulder, side by side, people talk a lot, specifically in the car. Cars, for whatever reason, people really open up in cars. So take all of this with a little bit of, a grain of salt. Generally, though, if you want to show people you're really engaged, being squared lib is a great way to start. Open body language. I'm going to roll back on my chair a little bit here. So open body language is basically that you're not doing this and you haven't got your knees crossed like this up here. Your body language, you don't really want to have your arms, holding yourself or super closed off. So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to be sitting there like this, super open. Just be comfortable. Remember, the last part of the acronym is relax. So you want to be comfortable. The L standing for leaning. I don't necessarily mean you have to be doing this. Just because you're really engaged, you can relax a little bit, but just not making sure not doing this. So just a gentle lean, indicating that you're paying attention. If it is more intense, you're probably going to find yourself naturally being drawn in more. E standing for eye contact. That is definitely, it's still a cultural thing, much like, being square might be a little bit more too aggressive for certain cultures or certain people. But for eye contact, there are some cultures that, as a sign of respect, they won't look you directly in the eyes, and they're still listening. It's just that they're not going to look at you in the eye. And if you want to respect them, you might not look at them directly in the eye as well. So be aware of that. Take your cues from the person who you're talking to, because that's generally the best way to go. And then the last one is relax. So, if you need to take a deep breath, you need to be relaxed, because if you're tense, then they are going to get more tense. And the more tense that they get, the more tense that you're probably going to get in response to that. So it's sort of a vicious cycle. So if you intentionally set your body, your muscles to, more relaxed, you intentionally keep your facial features calm and relaxed. That's honestly the main one, because these other responses, this response or doing that, or anything like that. A lot of that's going to come from not be feeling relaxed. If you relax and if you open up your body language, then it's going to be contagious. It's going to affect the person who's talking to you to feel more relaxed and feel a little bit more open. So that is solar. That's your nonverbals part of things. There are a few other things nonverbally that you can do. So, nodding to show you're paying attention. If it is a friend that you're speaking to and they're telling you something really heavy, you can lean forward and just touch them on their arm or on their shoulder, just to let them know you're there. That's also okay nonverbal behavior if you really need to. Do be careful with the touching. And again, that's for friend relationships, not really for client-patient relationships. So nonverbals happen throughout the interaction. In terms of what you actually, what responses are involved in active listening, there are certain responses that really work very well for active listening, and there's different types of them. So the first one that you generally use are acceptance statements, letting the person know that you're there to listen, just letting them know that this is a safe space where you can talk about whatever you need to talk about. Second kind is validation, sort of validation, reflection, and then there's clarification. I usually like to pair validation and clarification together. That's just always been what felt most natural to me. And then there's also open-ended questions. And those aren't necessarily sequential. Acceptance statements don't necessarily just happen in the beginning. Sometimes you need to revisit that acceptance. And in terms of validation happens again and again and again and again. And it's such a powerful tool. It's definitely the most important one. So yeah, validation happens throughout. And then clarification is, again, it's something that happens throughout the interaction. Open-ended questions are just a way of getting more details. So again, these aren't necessarily sequential. It's just different kinds of responses. So I have some examples of acceptance statements. Hopefully I figured out a way to throw them up on here so that you can actually read them, follow along. But basically, hey, this is a safe space. I'm here to listen. Or take your time. I'm listening. Or whenever you're ready, I'm here. I'm here for you. And even things like it's okay, take your time, or it's okay to be upset. Just anything letting people know that it's a safe space. And moving on to our next type of response, validation. So often people go throughout their lives just we're talking to each other and we're addressing the words that the other person is saying, but maybe we're not really listening to the underlying message behind the words. And a lot of times that underlying message has to do with people's feelings. So that's kind of what I focus on when I do validation is, it sounds like you're feeling really sad about this situation, or it sounds like this has been really frustrating for you. Or, you can see my examples up on the screen, hopefully. It's just a way of saying, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm also hearing your emotions, and I'm getting that, and I'm here for that, and I'm ready to talk about it. And validation is, again, something that you return to again and again and again. The reason I start all of these out with "it sounds like" is because it's a way of incorporating clarification into my validation. Because you might be hearing in someone's voice, you're like, wow, they sound really sad. But, for them, that might be the way that they express frustration, or, maybe they sound really angry, but then they say, no, I'm really just sad. And that's fine. You want to be able to clarify those feelings so that they can have a better understanding of where they're at, because it's powerful to be able to acknowledge. And that's all validating really is. It's just acknowledging, hey, I see you, I hear you, I'm getting the situation, and I'm also getting how you're feeling about the situation. Clarification. Clarification, I have a few examples, just those three, but basically the entire idea of clarification, as stated a little bit earlier when I was talking about validation, is just making sure that you are hearing them correctly in every sense of the word. Because a lot of times when people do finally open up to you, people are like, this happened and this happened and this happened. And you're like, oh my God, I'm trying to keep the members of the story straight and what's going on. And so it's a good way to slow down an interaction or a session and just make sure that you're actually following what's going on. It's also a good way to stop circular speaking, you know, telling the same story in different words again and again and again. Sometimes clarification can be the thing that people need to hear back so that they feel like they don't need to keep repeating themselves. Clarifying allows you to move forward, and it allows hopefully the person you're speaking to or the person you're listening to move forward, because it lets them know that they don't actually need to repeat that. Okie doke. So the one thing that people struggle with the most when it comes to active listening is open-ended questions. And I'm not really sure why that is exactly. There's something about closed-ended questions which I think are much more comfortable for people because, you know, sometimes when we're talking about difficult subjects, typically in our day-to-day lives, we don't always want to open up the conversation. We don't always want to crack it open and look at all the details, and you are able to, you know, get more details of the situation without dictating how the conversation is going to go. It really puts the power in the hands of the person who you're listening to, and that's a really good thing because that's part of feeling safe and empowered, being able to dictate the way the conversation goes. So open-ended questions are a way to give people the power to do that, while still, you know, hopefully getting more details that you need to know. So here are some examples of open-ended questions. And I like to bring attention to the second one from the bottom. So what have you tried so far? And the reason I like to bring attention to that is just because that is such a key question to be asking, especially when people come to you asking for advice, because chances are if you know, it feels great to give advice. It makes us feel like we're the expert, we're the professional. Wow, they want to know what I think they should do. Like, you know, it feels good. But you know, active listening, it's not about advice. It's not about judgment and letting people know if they've done the right or wrong thing. It's just about letting someone have the space to tell their story and, you know, having empathy with them while they do that. So asking what have you tried so far is just a great way to get right to the source of things. So, you know, someone's going on about their problem with their boyfriend and XYZ, and instead of saying, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried this? So-and-so I heard tried this. You know, instead of focusing that conversation and dictating it back onto what you think should be happening next, just saying, well, like, what have you tried so far? And that gives them an opportunity to talk to you about their expertise. That empowers them instead of empowering yourself so that you can feel smart. It lets them be the expert of their own life, which of course they are. Yeah, the other open-ended question that I really, really find to be super helpful, again, especially in cases of really circular language, is if asking somebody if this situation was going to resolve itself perfectly, or if there was an ideal ending to the situation, what would that be? Can you describe that for me? And that's a really good thing because it gets people, you know, it gets people to stop ruminating on the past and lets them turn their eyes forward a little bit. So that's another really helpful open-ended question. There are some good times to ask close-ended questions. If you're doing crisis response, if you're doing suicide risk assessment, or homicide risk assessment, if you're trying to, you know, get to just the basic details of who, what, when, where, why, then that's completely fine to ask open-ended questions. But in general, in an active listening situation, you want to be asking open-ended questions. Yeah. So if you liked this video, then definitely like, comment, share, whatever. I hope it's helpful for you. If you have any feedback for me, any questions, want to point out things I missed, because I'm sure there is stuff that I missed, or things you disagree with, agree with, whatever, just feel free to comment. The next video I'll be doing is going to be on suicide prevention, you know, knowing the signs, assessing the risk, and taking appropriate action. So definitely subscribe to the channel if this stuff kind of sounds interesting to you, if you're enjoying learning about this. And yeah, hope you all got something out of this, and I'll see you next time.